Hello, this is a Nameless Ghoul from Ghost. You are watching Artisan News.
With If You Have Ghost, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to make an EP of?
It was, I guess the word was due to circumstance. When we were getting ready to go in to record the actual album, there was a number of songs that we intended to take with us to Nashville. Um, that was supposed to be what they referred to as B-sides. Um, and all of a sudden, the opportunity to work with Dave arose. And as we were talking to him about possibly doing something, we were like, well, the only thing that we can possibly do right now, if we want to make this work right now, is that we can take a lot of the covers that we intend to record in Nashville and take them to you instead, and that will be our ground basis upon which we should work. And once we had done that, it turned these B-sides, the extra material, turned into sort of an own body of work, where obviously I'm a Marionette was on the Secular Haze single, but apart from that, it was considered like a complete craft of work from and we sort of felt like that, and the label saw the opportunity to sort of, well, we can take that release and put that later, which is not a is not a dumb idea. You do that for the longevity of the album cycle. Yeah, that's the story behind the release.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the partnership with Dave Grohl started and how it was recording with him in his studio?
Uh, it was very undramatic, I must say. I mean, we have a lot of both friends and business partners together. So when we were playing a festival in Holland or Belgium, we we had a I don't know what you call it, an artist play date or whatever. You just like, oh, he wants to meet you. Okay, we want to meet him too. And then you go over and say hi, take a photo. And we just happened to hit it off and quickly started talking about, well, frankly, there was actually 2 festivals in a row. We did a weekend together. So anyhow, we started talking, and it quickly sort of came up that, well, I have a studio. Oh, that's fantastic. We like studios. We like to play music in different constellations, and okay, should we do something together? Yeah, and you always say that, there's always that sort of hanging in the air, and it never amounts to anything. And especially if we're, if you are in 2 bands that are somewhat, well, they don't have to be successful to have a full schedule, and the schedules are full even though you're playing arenas or bars. It's hard to get things, the stars aligning in when you're trying to schedule something, when you have big sort of robust movements like Foo Fighters and Ghost. It's like, schedule-wise, it's a clusterfuck. But we just happened to have a little gap, and he just happened to have that gap in mind when we were talking. So it quickly sort of just like, yeah, whatever we were talking about, can we do that within 1 month? Yes. Do. So it was very undramatic in that sense. It was very spontaneous, and it had a flow and it had a purpose. So it felt felt great. He's a very, very nice person to work with and to hang with, and you know, all those things that they say about him, it's true.
For the EP, those songs don't feel like B-sides. They feel like each one was specifically crafted with a purpose, and they're fantastic tracks. I wanted to know, how do you guys decide what tracks to cover, and how do you go about making that cover your own?
I'd say that that's an ongoing process that most of the time I would assume happens either, you know, when we're home and you know, just hanging out listening to music, and it's like, oh shit, I think I got a perfect track that I found, and then you sort of play it and it's like, what can we do with this? uh, and obviously that's that same um, circumstances in the bus most of the time when we're touring, and there's a lot of things that sort of gets proposed, and sometimes it feels like 100%. Yeah, let's. Of course, we're gonna do that song. Absolutely. And sometimes it's a little bit borderline because of this, that, or the other. And but I would say that like the fundamental criteria is that we have to be able to do something with the song that is not that the original does not possess. I'm not talking about quality, but I'm just saying Waiting for the Night is a perfect example of that, because the original is so sparse. It's a very it's not a what you would call like a, it doesn't necessarily let me put it this way. It is not a rock song. It's clearly not a body of guitars and drums and bass and all that. It's just this weird ambient sort of sound, and you can vaguely sort of pick out the chords just by hearing his melodies. So that was something that has been lying around for a long time, that wow, that song, you could really, if you just play the same song but with an acoustic guitar and play the chords to it, it's actually a more beautiful song rather than an atmospheric song. So that, with the addition of the lyrics being sort of darkish and has, you know, it has a slightly almost suicidal theme. That sort of fits into what we are trying to, not suicide, but I'm just saying anything that sort of is leaning to the dark side of the force is basically what we are about. But then on the other hand, you have Here Comes the Sun, which is basically the juxtaposed. That's what made that perfect, because it's a very, very you know, the embracing of spring coming, and obviously the pun of sun, and you know.
With if there if you have ghosts,
Yeah.
there's a line: if you have ghosts, you have everything.
Yeah.
Because I listen to that track so much, and when I hear that, I almost feel as though you guys are saying, if you have our music, you have what we have created. Like, this is our life's work that we're giving to you. Was there almost sort of that vibe amongst you guys when you chose that song to cover? Like, you're giving, like almost as handing this work over to the audience and saying, this is our work, take it. It's just a crazy little theory that I have.
You want everybody to believe that your thoughts are profound. They're not always as profound as we want you all to believe. Obviously, we basically we just love Rock Erickson, and the Evil One, that record, has meant a lot to me and a couple of other guys in the band, and we just felt that obviously If You Have Ghosts was like, if we're gonna do one, we need to do that, obviously. And because we also knew that, well, out of all the songs that we've covered, that is probably one song that we have done less with in terms of rearrangement. but we felt that the original is still like a garagey rock sort of. He does the same melodies basically, the same lyrics almost. We had to sort of shorten it down a little bit to sort of make some sort of sense out of it. No offense, Rocky, but it's gibberish, or some of it at least. In the originals, to sort of pop it out a little bit, to sort of make it into yeah, we had to flesh it out a little bit, and we came up with the last sort of chorus that sort of finished the track. And when we had the ending made, like, if we're gonna do it, I want the song to end like this, in a little bit more of a grand finale way than the original that sort of just farts out. Then it was a given, absolutely. But and obviously, I mean, on top of that, there's a humoristic sort of tongue-in-cheek thing with the "if you have ghosts, you have everything." Of course.
Could you tell me a little bit about how you guys got together and decided to start the band? I heard a really interesting story that someone came up with a riff, but I'm curious to hear in your words how the band came together.
The entire band got together at a later point. There was a little group to begin with that looked at a project, basically. And that project was a logotype that said Ghost and a few songs. And as many bands nowadays, you tend to do things a little bit backwards, which is partly because technology nowadays allows you to do that, and from a time factor as well. You know, it has a time perspective where people in general don't have time to form a band the way that they used to, because you have a job or you have other commitments or you have other bands. So you need to have something that is very, what singles this project out, what makes it understandable. And Ghost was definitely one of those things that where, wow, this is like a concept thing. This is like, I mean, the songs and the lyrics, everything, the little body of work that was at that point was very, it had an epic impression even on us, that, it's like this is going to be like a big production band. This is going to be, we can't do this now. We need to, get a record out, and you need to take a few steps before we can actually sort of announce this or whatever, come out with this. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, we spent almost 2 years just having songs written, and just let it take its time, and doing costumes, and obviously we have to recruit Papa from somewhere. So when we finally had him in place and everything, the stars aligned. That's when we decided to, announce the band, and here we are. We have a record, and I think that just because of the subtlety of what we do, and it's such a clear vision that even we saw to begin with, that wow, this is this. We could really touch it, even though we haven't seen it before. And I think that that's probably one of the problems that a lot of bands have, that they, when you're representing yourself as even worse if you're like a singer-songwriter, because if you don't come from a war background, or like a really troubled home, or if you're not a hermaphrodite, or there's no big selling point, it's very hard to differentiate from it of all the others that are standing there. And that's one of the things that obviously we're conscious about, but it was also a practical thing, So that therefore our beginnings were quite contemporary because a lot of bands today do that. They release a record and then they start touring. And we did the same thing basically.
Love what you're saying because as a fan, it's so great to hear about this. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys sort of developed the Papa Emeritus persona?
I think he more or less created himself. He's a sort of an imitation of a certain kind of man that I think a lot of people have met, either in the form of a teacher or a store owner or a father or a restaurant chef or he's more of a stereotype than an actual living creature. But just because he's a stereotype and you've met him in some form or another, he's real. In the night, he's real.
Wow, wow, that's powerful. Ghost is a very theatrical band. Can you tell me a little bit about how you decided to incorporate such theatrics into the band, and if you or any of the members have theatrical backgrounds, or if this just sort of developed as the band did?
None of us have like a professional theatrical background. And I mean, to put things clear, I mean, a lot of the things that we set out to do, even 5 years ago, before we even announced the band, are things that we haven't yet not realized, just because of, the loss of gravity sort of disables. We're still a growing band, and a lot of the ideas that we have in store that we intend to realize in the future are a lot of things that looked very good on paper 5 years ago and 3 years ago, but it basically, you need an arena to do that. You need to be on we need to play Madison Square Garden to do that. So that's one of the things that keeps on motivating us a lot, because we know that as we grow, there are definitely, if you like what we do now, it's like, wait until we do the next thing. There's a lot of things that we have not done. So for us, I think that we are just now partially theatrical. It's still way too much of a rock and roll band playing on stage, whereas the idea was for it to be magical tricks and show, a lot more happening. And but as I was saying, the whole concept was spawned. Obviously, the music is spawned by playing or writing, but a lot of the conceptual things is spawned by sitting in a sofa together and, being inspired by films and music and movie posters. And, it's very, very rudimentary sort of boy room or girl room, but I mean, it's very pop cultural thinking, and it's very inspired, and it's very going back to the childhood, sort of seeing everything through the eyes of a child, basically. The thing that got myself into Kiss at one point, and Mötley Crüe, and Alice Cooper, and loving horror films, and all that. Collecting records. All those things. It's sort of supposed to be encompassed in this. It's supposed to be like the epitome of pop cultural shock rock extravaganza. Entertainment, y'all.
Could you tell me about some of the ideas that you guys have thrown around that maybe you haven't had the means to go through with yet, or maybe you haven't found the right way of sort of presenting
I think that our show right now is too one-dimensional. Um, One thing that we really want to explore in the future is the idea of having set changes. Just that alone will be a big difference, because if you are in a if you are the master of your own environment in the terms of your stage, which we cannot do. I mean, even here, this is a big venue, but it's like it's not an arena stage. You cannot like build it your way. But when you have your own stage and you have your own like 100% production, there's a lot of things that you can do that takes the spectator through 2 hours of media, depth. And I think that now, when we're 2 albums into it and 1.5 hour of not too many changes, and I think that from my point of view, from a creative point of view, I think that this is very much a trailer version of what we intended to do, in the sense of bringing depth and change into the show. But I don't want to shoot down what we're doing, but this is, yeah, I feel it's a little bit like George Lucas when he did his films. It was still just a half of what he intended to do. But that's the growing pains, I guess, of being on the way to something that might materialize into something else.
Talking about the Music Hall of Williamsburg, and I was floored by the sheer energy that you guys have, because you weren't moving, but you felt something, something draws you in, and I can't describe it, and I really haven't felt it in a band in a very long time. But there's something about your presence and Papa's presence that just sort of draws the crowd in. So it's really interesting to hear that there's more that you plan on. So I just felt like saying that. But there are other theatrical bands out there who've come before you, Guar, Slipknot, Alice Cooper, the Misfits, who've sort of had to a point, had their identities hidden, but still managed to amass this fan base. Do you feel like bands like Guar or some of these other bands sort of paved a pathway for you guys to rise up?
Well, I mean, if it hadn't been for some of these bands, we wouldn't probably exist. So it's, in a way, yes, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what to answer. I mean, obviously, this is inspired by Kiss, and to a large degree Misfits, actually. Even though we have sort of yanked out the pop elements of Misfits music, more so than the punkish. But attitude-wise, it's supposed to have the same sort of sticking it to the man sort of feel, or that's the message. Stick it. So there's definitely like a stream of punk in what we're doing. So I guess so.
Just lost my place. You guys achieved massive popularity over the course of just 6 years. Bands go for decades without achieving the sort of popularity you guys have in such a short period of time. Did you ever expect Ghost to reach this height? And how did it feel when you realized that, people were really into this?
Even though things obviously moved quickly for us, it's not something that happens overnight. There has been like moments where we have felt basically the growing of an inch, like, just when we came here for the first time, we well, technically we played in Baltimore. That was the first show we ever did, and that was fine and all, but one of our biggest moments that really made us feel like what we are doing means something for more people than just us. Was when we played at the studio in the basement there at Webster Hall. Because it was our first time, for many of us, it was actually the first time ever being in the US as well. And obviously, as a pop cultural sort of enthusiast, coming here it is a big deal. And New York is the coolest city on the planet. So being able to come to New York for the first time, being asked to be there, and it was not a monetary thing at all. Let me just put it that way. But and at least you got there, just on the expense of your art history. That was phenomenal in the first place. But having that response from that packed club, and it was the first time. It wasn't the first time we played in front of an English-speaking audience, but it was the first time where we actually noticed that. I think that a lot of our lyrical themes and the way that the lyrics are written, sometimes in Europe it's, like Satan Prayer is a song that they don't get that because they don't understand that it's the Jesus Prayer just inverted. They don't know what that is because they know it in their language. And, there's a little bit of a tongue tumbling in there, like the anti-Nicene Creed and stuff like that. That does not work in certain places. And all of a sudden we come to America, and everybody knows how to sing along for the entire show. From the first word to the last word, it was like... And I think that was one of those moments where we felt that, crap, I think we're touring here more. I think we're going to tour here in the US a lot more. So eventually we started doing that. And then we've had moments of, just because of that New York experience, New York has always been, ever since then, has been our parameter of growth. Stockholm is that as well, just because it's not our hometown, but almost. But New York has always been the parameter because we played the basement, and then we moved up to the Bowery, and then we moved up to Webster Hall, the real one, the Ritz. And in between there we played the Roseland, and then ended up obviously here. And it's, you can see the curve very steadily going in a certain direction. And obviously being a megalomaniac, when you have the MSG in sight, you just want to jump all that way. So New York is always very magical for us. Thank you, New York. You treated us so well that first time. That probably made a lot of this come true, actually.
Just two more questions. I have so many more questions.
All right.
Just two more questions. Do you think that we will ever see the masks come off of Ghost?
Not on stage.
And do you have anything coming up in the next 4, 5, or 6 months that you'd like the fans to know about?
We'll be touring up until September, and after that we're recording. So we're going to record a new record that will hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we hope spring, around March, April next year.